For the past couple of years, we have done lots and lots of stories about shortages of all kinds of things. And you may have noticed the last time you went to the store, it's tough to find things made out of cotton right now. Turns out there is an international cotton shortage. 2 on your side's Kelly Dudzik joining us now to explain.
Home once again. Last week, President Trump approved new tariffs on Chinese goods totaling about $50 billion. And China has retaliated again with the potential of hitting West Texas farmers pretty hard. KMAX Tori Larned shows us how this is adding stress to an already unpredictable season.
Feature segment today, trouble in cotton country. As you heard from Leighton in the Farm Week market segment, there was some good news for cotton producers as the National Cotton Council survey for 2016 showed a possible 6.3% increase in U.S. cotton acreage this year. Now, in spite of this, there are many in cotton country who say the long-term trend points towards U.S. cotton going out of business in the coming years.
The cotton farming crisis unfolding across Texas has reached a point of emotional, economic, and political rupture. What was once a pillar of agricultural strength is now collapsing under the weight of converging pressures that few anticipated would arrive all at once. Cotton fields that once symbolized reliability, heritage, and prosperity are now marked by uncertainty, abandoned acreage, and mounting debt. The scale of the crisis has become so overwhelming that leadership at the state level is showing visible signs of strain, reflecting the magnitude of what is at stake for Texas and the wider agricultural economy of the United States. Cotton farming has long been central to Texas, not only as an economic engine but as a cultural foundation. Entire regions depend on cotton for employment, infrastructure funding, and community identity. Generations of families structured their lives around planting cycles, harvest seasons, and export markets that once provided predictable income. That predictability has vanished. Farmers now face shrinking yields, collapsing prices, and costs that rise faster than any possible recovery. The traditional balance that sustained cotton farming has broken down. Extreme weather has played a decisive role in accelerating the crisis. Prolonged drought, record heat, and erratic rainfall have devastated yields across large swaths of Texas. Irrigation costs have soared while water availability has declined. Fields that once produced consistent output are now delivering only fractions of expected harvests. Crop insurance, designed for variability rather than systemic failure, has proven inadequate. Many farmers find that payouts arrive too late or fall far short of covering losses, leaving them exposed and financially exhausted. At the same time, global market pressures are crushing margins. Cotton prices fluctuate wildly due to international competition, currency shifts, and changing demand patterns. Producers in Texas are competing against countries with lower labor costs and aggressive export strategies. When prices fall, Texas farmers have little buffer left. Input costs such as fuel, seed, fertilizer, equipment maintenance, and labor continue to climb, forcing producers to sell at or below the cost of production. Each season becomes a gamble rather than a business plan. The financial strain has reached a breaking point. Credit lines that once carried farms through lean years are now stretched to their limits. Lenders are tightening conditions, reassessing land values, and reducing exposure to agricultural risk. Farmers who miss a single payment face foreclosure, while others are forced to sell equipment or acreage simply to survive another season. The emotional toll of watching land that has been in families for generations slip away is profound and deeply destabilizing. Rural communities across Texas are absorbing the shock. Cotton farming supports not only producers but gins, transport companies, equipment dealers, and local retailers. As farms scale back or shut down, jobs disappear and businesses struggle. School districts dependent on agricultural tax bases face budget shortfalls. Healthcare access declines as clinics lose funding. What begins in the field spreads outward, hollowing out entire regions and leaving behind economic scars that may take decades to heal. The political response has grown increasingly strained as the crisis deepens. Public statements reflect frustration, urgency, and a sense of helplessness in the face of forces beyond state control. Emergency meetings, appeals for federal assistance from the United States, and policy proposals signal recognition of the severity of the situation. Yet each response appears insufficient against the scale of collapse. The visible breakdown in leadership tone mirrors the breakdown occurring across cotton-producing regions. Behind the emotional response lies a stark reality. There are no easy solutions. Short-term aid may slow the bleeding but cannot reverse structural damage. Climate volatility shows no sign of easing. Global markets remain unforgiving. Technological adaptation requires capital many farmers no longer possess. The cotton industry in Texas is being squeezed from every direction simultaneously, leaving little room to maneuver. Mental health strain among farmers is rising sharply. Isolation, financial pressure, and a sense of failure weigh heavily on individuals who built their identities around the land. Support systems in rural Texas are limited, and stigma often prevents seeking help. The crisis is not only economic but deeply human, affecting families, relationships, and community cohesion. Silent despair spreads as neighbors face similar struggles and feel powerless to intervene. The broader implications extend beyond Texas. Cotton from the United States plays a significant role in global textile supply chains. Declining production affects exporters, manufacturers, and downstream industries. Reduced output can shift market power toward other producing countries, weakening the long-term position of American agriculture. What happens in Texas cotton fields reverberates through international markets and trade relationships. As the crisis continues, younger generations are turning away from farming altogether. Witnessing instability and hardship, many choose careers outside agriculture, accelerating demographic decline in rural areas. Knowledge passed down over generations risks being lost, further undermining the future of cotton farming in Texas. This erosion of human capital may prove as damaging as the financial losses themselves. The breakdown visible at the state level reflects an acknowledgement that the cotton farming crisis is no longer manageable through incremental change. It demands a fundamental reassessment of how agriculture is supported, insured, and valued within the United States. Without structural reform, the current trajectory points toward continued consolidation, loss of family farms, and the disappearance of cotton as a viable livelihood for many in Texas. As fields lie fallow and uncertainty deepens, Texas stands at a crossroads. The cotton farming crisis has stripped away illusions of stability and exposed the fragility beneath tradition. The emotional weight carried by leadership mirrors the burden borne by thousands of farmers watching their way of life unravel. Whether Texas can adapt, stabilize, and rebuild will depend on choices made under immense pressure, in a moment when resilience alone may no longer be enough to hold the system together. The cotton farming crisis in Texas continues to intensify, moving beyond an agricultural downturn and becoming a full-scale socio-economic emergency. What once appeared as a difficult season has evolved into a prolonged breakdown that is reshaping land use, labor markets, and rural identity across the state. As losses accumulate and recovery grows more distant, the emotional strain visible in public leadership reflects a deeper reality shared by thousands of farming families who see no clear path forward. One of the most damaging aspects of the crisis is its cumulative nature. Cotton farming in Texas has always involved risk, but those risks were historically balanced by strong years that offset weaker ones. That balance no longer exists. Consecutive seasons of drought, extreme heat, and erratic weather have depleted financial reserves and exhausted adaptive capacity. Even farmers who managed operations conservatively now find themselves overwhelmed, not because of a single failure but because of relentless pressure without reprieve. Water scarcity has become a defining constraint. Aquifers are under severe stress, irrigation costs continue to rise, and regulatory limits further restrict access. In many cotton-producing regions of Texas, water availability now determines whether planting is even possible. Fields that once supported large-scale production are being left idle because the cost of irrigation exceeds any potential return. This shift is altering the agricultural landscape itself, turning productive land into a symbol of forced retreat rather than choice. Market dynamics offer little relief. Global cotton demand remains volatile, influenced by synthetic alternatives, shifting consumer preferences, and aggressive production from other countries. Texas farmers are price takers in a global system where they hold little influence. When prices dip, losses are immediate and severe. When prices rise modestly, gains are often erased by increased input costs or reduced yields. This imbalance has trapped producers in a cycle where effort and risk are no longer rewarded proportionally. Debt has become an inescapable burden. Operating loans are rolled over from season to season, compounding interest and tightening conditions. Land that once represented security is now leveraged against survival. As land values fluctuate, collateral weakens, prompting lenders to reassess risk. Some farmers are forced into liquidation, not because they failed to produce, but because the system no longer tolerates prolonged instability. The resulting foreclosures fracture communities and leave emotional scars that extend far beyond balance sheets. The ripple effects across rural Texas are accelerating. Cotton gins operate below capacity or shut down entirely, eliminating specialized jobs that cannot easily transition elsewhere. Equipment dealers, seed suppliers, and transport operators face declining demand, leading to layoffs and closures. Each loss reduces the resilience of the local economy, making recovery harder with every passing month. Small towns built around cotton now struggle to justify infrastructure maintenance, public services, and even basic commerce. Social consequences are becoming increasingly visible. Families relocate in search of work, leaving behind aging populations and shrinking school enrollments. Local traditions tied to harvest seasons and community gatherings fade as participation declines. The sense of shared purpose that once defined cotton regions erodes, replaced by quiet resignation and uncertainty. This loss of social cohesion compounds the economic damage, weakening informal support networks that once helped communities weather hardship. Mental health challenges continue to rise, though they remain largely hidden. Financial stress, isolation, and the erosion of identity tied to farming contribute to anxiety and depression. In Texas, access to mental health services in rural areas is limited, and cultural barriers discourage open discussion. The crisis unfolds in silence for many, with consequences that surface only when they reach a breaking point. The emotional weight borne by leadership reflects countless private struggles playing out across the countryside. Policy responses face structural limitations. Emergency assistance can provide temporary relief, but it cannot restore water, stabilize global markets, or reverse climate trends. Long-term adaptation strategies such as crop diversification, technology investment, or alternative land use require capital that many farmers no longer possess. The gap between what is needed and what is feasible grows wider, fueling frustration and despair. The crisis has also accelerated consolidation. Larger operations with access to capital absorb land from those forced to exit, reshaping ownership patterns. While consolidation may improve efficiency in some respects, it reduces the number of independent producers and concentrates risk. Communities lose not only farms but voices, leadership, and generational continuity. The transformation of cotton farming in Texas increasingly favors scale over stewardship, altering the character of rural life. Younger generations are making clear choices, observing the instability and emotional toll on their families. Many decide against entering agriculture. Educational and career paths shift away from farming, draining the sector of future talent. This demographic shift threatens long-term viability even if conditions improve. Without people willing and able to farm, recovery becomes a theoretical exercise rather than a practical outcome. The implications extend beyond state borders. Cotton from the United States remains integral to global supply chains, and sustained decline in Texas production affects exporters, manufacturers, and trade balances. Reduced output can shift influence toward other producing nations, weakening the strategic position of American agriculture. The crisis in Texas cotton fields thus carries national and international consequences, underscoring how localized collapse can reverberate widely. Public perception of agriculture is also changing. Once seen as a stable and honorable livelihood, cotton farming is increasingly viewed as unsustainable under current conditions. This shift influences policy priorities, investment decisions, and cultural narratives. When agriculture loses its perceived viability, support erodes, creating a feedback loop that accelerates decline. Despite the bleak outlook, resilience persists in pockets. Farmers experiment with drought-resistant practices, alternative crops, and collaborative models to share resources. Community organizations mobilize to provide assistance and advocacy. These efforts demonstrate determination, but they operate against overwhelming odds. Resilience alone cannot substitute for structural change in climate adaptation, market fairness, and rural investment. The visible breakdown in leadership tone reflects an acknowledgement of these realities. It is not merely a reaction to immediate losses but a recognition that the crisis challenges foundational assumptions about agriculture in Texas. The emotional response mirrors the collective weight of a system under strain, one that demands transformation rather than endurance. As the cotton farming crisis deepens, Texas faces hard choices: continued decline risks irreversible loss of land, knowledge, and community. Meaningful recovery requires reimagining how cotton farming fits within a changing environmental and economic landscape of the United States. The moment calls for honesty about limits, commitment to adaptation, and recognition of the human cost embedded in every statistic. The fields of Texas tell a story no longer defined by abundance, But by uncertainty, the crisis has stripped away illusions and exposed vulnerabilities long ignored. Whether this moment becomes a turning point or a prolonged unraveling will depend on decisions made amid pressure, fatigue, and grief. What remains clear is that the cotton farming crisis is not just an agricultural problem but a defining challenge for the future of rural Texas and its place within the broader American economy.